A renewed offensive to recapture Mosul. Allied forces face their fiercest battle yet against Daesh in the western half of the city. Also on today's program, Russia's illusion of influence. We speak to a top political philosopher, Alexandr Dugin, about whether Moscow's impact in the Middle East is really as strong as it may seem. I'm Imran Garda, and this is the Newsmakers. Western Mosul is Daesh's last stronghold in Iraq, and a new offensive to retake that part of the city is expected to be the Iraqi army's most daunting battle yet. This is the terror group's heartland, where leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared a so-called caliphate after they overran the city in 2014. It took US-backed Iraqi forces 100 days and considerable losses to recapture the eastern half of the city. Western Mosul is smaller but more densely packed, and there are grave fears for the 750,000 civilians believed to be trapped there. Aid agencies fear an unprecedented exodus of families trying to escape the fighting. So far, Iraqi forces say they have gained ground against Daesh, but this is expected to be a much longer and tougher fight to push the group out for good. Today's newsmaker is the battle to take back Western Mosul. And to get us started, we have this report by Sandra Gatman.
It was the summer of 2014 when Daesh rolled into Mosul. After a lightning offensive, the group seized the city, taking weapons and millions of dollars in cash to fund and expand its so-called caliphate. Mosul became Daesh's main stronghold in Iraq. But in October last year, Iraqi forces prepared to take the city back. Kurdish Peshmerga fighters defended their ground in the north, while Iraqi forces advanced from the south and the east. By January this year, Iraqi troops reclaimed all of eastern Mosul, which stops at the Tigris River dividing the city. With the help of US warplanes, they cut off Daesh by bombing 4 bridges, buying the army some time to prepare for the next offensive to take over the west. Iraqi counterterrorism units have been on the move since Sunday. Backed by jets, helicopters, and US coalition forces, they're taking surrounding villages from Daesh. Some units have now reached Mosul's southern edge.
This is the gate to Mosul. Mosul is nearby, about 2 kilometers. We will soon enter Mosul, God willing.
But the main offensive will have to be on foot. Western Mosul is densely populated with old and narrow streets. And more than 750,000 civilians are believed to be trapped inside.
Security forces were able to protect hundreds of thousands of civilians in eastern Mosul. 550,000 civilians stayed in their homes. Their intention is to use a similar humanitarian concept of operations in western Mosul as long as it's effective.
For Iraqi forces, the battle ahead will be daunting. But they sense victory and are pushing ahead. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Iraq analyst Ali Al-Mawlawi in Baghdad. He's the head of research at the Al-Bayan Center for Planning and Studies. And from Tunis, Zaid Al-Ali. He's a former Iraq advisor to the United Nations. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Ali Al-Mawlawi, let's begin with you. The Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi, said, "It's a new dawn, a dawn of victories." Isn't this a bit premature, given that Daesh can still put up quite a fight in the west and the south of Mosul?
Well, I think it's important not to be complacent, but given the successes over the past 4 months in the eastern part of Mosul, I think it's good to be optimistic. Of course, ISIS has had 2.5 years to prepare for this battle. So, of course, Iraqi security forces should be prepared for a lot of tricks and surprises that they may face going forward.
Zaid, major worries over civilians and whether they can be looked after, whether they can be helped on their way out. And these are hundreds of thousands of people. The UN and others are concerned. But beyond that as well, whether they can they can avoid being tortured or even slaughtered, because we saw horrible things happen to them after Fallujah was retaken by Shia militias and the Iraqi government and so on. How confident are you that civilians won't bear the brunt of the suffering if and when Mosul is retaken?
What I would say is, I mean, civilians in Mosul are obviously in the middle of a war zone. So there's no question that they're going to be suffering, and that they won't be in very good circumstances, regardless of how careful security forces are. There are many civilians will be killed, many will be injured. There's absolutely no avoiding it. It's going to happen. The question is whether any of the suffering, killing, and wounding will be taking place deliberately at the hands of Iraqi security forces. And despite what we've seen happen in other parts of Iraq and in other circumstances, it looks that so far, by and large, broadly, security forces that are taking place in the battle to liberate Mosul have been acting very professionally and have not been engaging in any deliberate repression of the local population. Having said that, the major problem that we have in Mosul, as is the case elsewhere, is that the security services in the country are very much splintered. There isn't a single security sector or single service that's responsible for doing all of the liberating or all of the fighting or all of the peacekeeping after the fighting is over. You have one unit which is called the Counterterrorism Service, which is doing a lot of the frontline battling, and they're doing a very fine job and they're very professional. But after they move on, territory is afterwards taken over by other groups and other units. And their level of professionalism can often be very mixed. Sometimes it's very high, sometimes it's not. And therefore the concern is the behavior of those groups after they take over from the counterterrorism service and the types of behavior that they'll be engaging in.
And Ali, the US is providing air cover to all of these groups, but the Iraqi army and, of course, those other groups. Now, how encouraged are you by the fact that General Mattis has said, hey, we're not in Iraq to take the oil, contradicting what his boss had said a bit earlier, and that the US is committed to providing air cover to these operations to try to root out Daesh? How encouraged are you by that?
Well, I think the coordination has improved drastically over the past year. Iraqi forces are relying in large part on air cover from the international coalition. So I'd expect that level of coverage to continue going forward into this new administration. I think there are still many challenges, logistical challenges to fix, and of course going forward, once the city is retaken, there is an enormous security challenge of ensuring that law and order is established and really rooting out the final remnants of ISIS. There is a danger, of course, of sleeper cells that may remain in the city, and for that reason I think the role of the Iraqi army is perhaps to secure the borders of the city, but there is an important role for the local police and also local leaders, local politicians, to ensure that the city remains stable going forward.
And Zaid, final question for you. If Daesh is routed in Mosul, as many people hope and expect, and then onward to Raqqa in Syria, they're taken out there, is there unfortunately the horrible twist to that we might expect more terrorism in many towns and cities outside of Iraq and Syria as they lash out?
That will probably happen, but it's what will definitely happen is more terrorism inside Iraq. Obviously, terrorism outside of Iraq and in Europe and Turkey and elsewhere hasn't been good, but it's really Iraq that's borne the brunt of the terrorist activities that we're talking about. Iraq has had the most sustained, violent, and brutal terrorist campaign waged against it in the whole history of mankind. You're talking about the equivalent of one September 11th every month since 2003. So it's been 14 years of sustained terrorist activity in Iraq. So, while we can expect that there might be more terrorism activity outside of the Middle East, it's really Iraqis who will be bearing the brunt of this. And the lesson for Iraq has to be that the proper way to engage with this is a more professional security service that is capable of investigating crimes and distinguishing terrorists from non-terrorists.
Good point. Unfortunately, I've got to wrap. Zaid and Ali, thanks so much for joining us. In recent months, Russia has arguably positioned itself as the world's newest power broker. From being a game changer in the war in Syria to being accused of meddling in US politics, some see the hand of the Kremlin extending to uncharted territory. And last week, Moscow reached out to Kurdish political groups, courting yet another side in regional conflicts. But at home, Russia faces a financial crisis that refuses to go away. So are Moscow's growing ambitions being held back by domestic challenges? And is Russia's ability to influence world affairs really as strong as it may seem? Natalie Perhernan takes a look.
Russia's top diplomat is a man on a mission. Sergei Lavrov is at the forefront of Moscow's efforts to promote itself as an international power broker, with the Kremlin calling for a new world order.
Ответственные лидеры должны сделать выбор. Надеюсь, что выбор будет сделан в пользу созидания демократического и справедливого мирового порядка. Если хотите, назовите его пост-Вест.
And in the game of geopolitics, Russia has become a major player in Syria. It's provided Bashar al-Assad's regime with military might, from troops on the ground to strikes from the skies, and helped the government secure a seat at the negotiating table. It may be trying to expand its reach. Last week, Russia hosted Kurdish groups from Turkey, Iran, Iraq and Syria for a conference on the Middle East. On the same day, it brought multiple players involved in the Afghan conflict together for peace talks. Russia has been cultivating contacts with the Taliban as a countermeasure against Daesh, a move which isn't backed by all of the other parties, or a key player which wasn't invited to join the talks.
Mr. Chairman, I agree there have been an increase in external actors interfering in the Afghan attainment of peace and stability.
And the Russian involvement?
The Russian involvement this year has become more difficult.
Moscow's displays of military muscle and diplomatic might in Syria have taken place while the country has endured its worst recession in 2 decades. It is slowly emerging from that economic crisis. But the fall in energy prices and Western sanctions have meant less money and fewer jobs for ordinary Russians. The World Bank warned last year that the number of poor people in Russia would rise to more than 20 million, out of a population of about 140 million. In the face of such immense domestic challenges, can this really be the era of a resurgent Russia on the foreign policy front? Natalie Perhernan, The Newsmakers.
He's been called everything from a fascist to Vladimir Putin's brain. Well, I'm joined now from Moscow by political philosopher Alexandr Dugin, the leader of the international Eurasian movement. Thanks so much for joining us, sir. First of all, our condolences on the loss of your ambassador to the UN, Ambassador Churkin. We're very sorry about that news. Now, let me ask you, the international Eurasian movement, what does that mean?
International Eurasian movement, it is the plan to create the different world, not a globalist world with one pattern imposed on everybody, on every culture, but to create the multipolar world where Eurasian civilization, represented by Russia and by other Eurasian civilizations, should be free to develop its own systems, its own values, its own traditions. And all that we cannot affirm and defend under attack of globalization. And now Eurasianism, it is idea of orientation on the deep identity, on the deep identity of every culture, every people. In our case, in case of Russia, it means that we need to defend our own Eurasian identity. That is not European and that is not Asian, it is Eurasian. I think that is the main goal of international Eurasian movement. It is to promote such attitude and to fight for multipolar world against unipolar world.
But didn't we try this in the 20th century with the Soviet Union? A Russian-dominated Eurasian identity. It failed. The Soviet Union. It was finished. It didn't work.
Yes, absolutely, because it wasn't Eurasian ideology. Eurasian ideology is not totalitarian. It is not based on the Western pattern, because communism was based on the Western pattern. It was ideology imitated from the West, and all the ideas of social progress, of technological development, all the class war, all that was created in the West and applied to the Russia. And the result was destruction of Russian identity. Eurasian tries to Eurasianism. Eurasia should be based on the traditional values and not on the communist or socialist or artificial values.
Sure.
Yes, that is a completely different approach.
Right. Okay, so I want to keep this moving on. Now, you would be aware of George Friedman, who wrote The Next 100 Years. He's a geopolitical forecaster, much like yourself, but from the United States. He's written many books. A lot of people follow him. Last month, I interviewed him, and I asked him about Russian power and about Russia becoming more and more powerful. Have a listen to what he had to say to me.
Let's not fantasize about the power of Russia. It is an oil exporting country. The price of oil has fallen. Its economy is in shambles. Although it performed reasonably well in Syria, it certainly has not solved the Syrian problem. It has a very small footprint. Russia is a very weak country pretending to be much stronger than it is.
Russia is a very weak country pretending to be much stronger than it is. What do you say to that, sir?
I think that we need to make a kind of reality check. Russia was really a very weak country in the 90s. With Yeltsin, with oligarchs, with Westerners, it was weak. But it is not anymore weak. And with Putin, we began to change this situation, to reaffirm our country, our state, as the pole of power. And we could make a reality check. What happened in Georgia after attack against Tskhinvali? What happened in Crimea after attack against Russian identity in Ukraine? So we now are very strong and country with not so good economy, I would say, and with many weak points, but our traditional spirit, our army, our leadership, our mobilization of our country in favor of sovereignty and defense of our identity, it's stronger and stronger. I think that the Western is a decay. The Western civilization is falling apart, and it is losing itself, its identity. And I think that now it's time to think about Western weakness, about the weakness of the West, and not point out that we are weak. Maybe we are not the strongest country, but we are one of the strongest. Maybe we are not first country in the world, but we belong to the club of the first-class countries of the world.
And my apologies again for interrupting, and I know there's a slight delay. My apologies again, I know there's a slight delay. Is this why you believe that Turkey and Russia and maybe even the Iranians need each other more than they individually need the United States? Do you want these countries to come together to create that answer to the unipolar world that you talk about?
Absolutely. You have exposed very good my ideas. I think that Russia, being great Eurasian country, needs now the partnership and strategic partnership with Turkey that is as well Eurasian countries. But we could not reorganize and solve our regional problems. We could not reorganize Middle East without the help and participation of Iran. Three of us, Turkey, Iran and Russia, we need each other. We are three empires in the past. We were three empires. And we were traditional empires with different identities, but we were on traditional side. And United States is postmodern country. Today it will be bothered much more by itself with Trump. And it is the chance for us to strengthen our context to create a real strategical partnership between Turkey, Iran and Russia. It is the moment for that. And I think that helping together, we could achieve our goals. Each countries of us, each three of us cannot achieve its own goal, cooperating, because we have the keys for Syria. We have the keys together, Turkey, Iran and Russia, for Iraq. We have the keys for the Middle East. And if we not follow Greater Middle East project that has failed, absolutely failed, if we consider the situation realistically, basing on mutual help and common strategy, we could solve almost any problem in the Middle East.
Okay, let's talk about the United States for the moment and the new administration. There are many who believe that Steve Bannon, who's got Trump's ear, is inspired by you. In many ways, they compare him to you. They call you Putin's Rasputin, and Bannon has all sorts of connotations when it comes to Trump. They seem as inspired by you. You said after Trump's inauguration, quote, "Incredibly beautiful, one of the best moments of my life." At the moment in the United States, in the build-up to that election and after the election, there are tremendous divisions in the country. If not a real civil war, there seems to be a cultural civil war going on in the United States right now. Does that please you that that's happening in the US?
Absolutely. I'm happy with what is going on there. Not I'm happy with the civil war, but I'm happy that American people is awakening, in the process of awakening, because American people with Trump electoral campaign has remarked that United States of America as a national state was hijacked by globalist elite, and this globalist elite that has nothing to do with American people, American history, American values, they try to use United States of America in their supranational international goals. So that is a very good sign. What about Bannon? I appreciate him. I consider him very interesting political thinker. He has mentioned my name sometimes, but I don't think he is really influenced by my books and my thoughts, because he is very particular. We share some ideas with him. I am very glad that the people like Steve Bannon now are in administration of new American president. We share some points with him, some points we consider differently, but what is sure, he is traditionalist. He shared that conservative understanding of the history, of the culture, of identity, and that's exactly what I believe in. So maybe with such a traditionalist trend in politics and culture and the strategy, we could achieve much better understanding between United States and Russia. Before, we considered United States as the same as the synonymous of globalization, of global elite, and now the situation is changed. And I don't think that Trump will be unconditionally pro-Russian. Absolutely no, and I'm not expecting that. I'm sure, on the other hand, that he will try to concentrate on American affairs, of domestic affairs, and he will try to make America America again, because before it wasn't America, it was a kind of globalist hub to impose on civilization and humanity its completely irrational, radical, anti-human values, so-called gay marriages, transhumanism, feminism, aggressive feminism. And I think now there is sane America, Trump's America, against ill America, sick America. And I wish to real and sane and conservative American America to win this battle, to win this struggle. With all my heart, I am on the side of American conservatives that try to make America great again. And I suggest to do the same for Russia and for Turkey. Let us make Russia great again. Let us make Turkey great again. That is how I understand Trump and his victory.
Sir, I wish we had more time, and I hope you'll sit down with me for a longer interview in the not-too-distant future. Unfortunately, we are out of time for now. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Alexandr Dugin. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.